remembering our heritage. The First United Methodist Church has been in Springdale in some form or another since the early 1800s. In 1872, the church was known as the Methodist Episcopal Church South when the congregation shared a building with the Missionary Baptist Church and the Masonic Lodge. The church then moved to the corner of Emma Avenue and Main Street in 1884 and soon merged with the Methodist Episcopal Church North.
After some years, we needed more room, and so in 1930, January of 1930, some property was born at the present site where we now have our chapel, but that was our sanctuary. The Depression was so bad at that time, that was 1930, that the building plans were postponed for quite some time. It wasn't until 5 years later that a 7-member committee was appointed to be the building committee. One reason this is so precious to me is my father, John L. Fay Stafford, was chairman of the building committee, and my grandfather, A.A. Backus, was also a member of that committee.
When we began to build the new church in 1936, we had to move out, and I was baptized actually in the old Oddfellow building, which was not actually a church at that time.
The move to the present location came in 1937. In 1939, the merged church was renamed the Methodist Church.
The builders class was formed in the first part of 1951. Alice Snyder was an early teacher and organizer of the class. With her personality and outstanding teacher's ability, the class grew fast.
In 1961, Ivy Hall was completed and named for Dr. George F. Ivy, a beloved pastor. In 1968, the Methodist Church merged with the Church of the United Brethren to become the United Methodist Church. 2 more major expansions occurred within the next 13 years. The Kimbrough Building in 1973, which is named for Dr. Oscar Kimbrough and houses Sunday school classes and creative school classrooms. And the new sanctuary, which was consecrated in 1981.
The women of our church many, many years ago, and still are, but most of the women that did these are now deceased, and they were very, very dedicated women. I personally know that because one of them was my mother-in-law, Gretchen Steele, and she, I know, did a lot with others, and I imagine maybe Mrs. Anna Brown and Alice Snyder and Mabel Ruth, Perry and Clara Turnbow, and I'm sure many others. But I believe these were done in the early 80s because we were going to be going into our new sanctuary. And we had this beautiful tree in the atrium, and it was decorated with these, and it was quite lovely.
More recent projects to the downtown campus have included the completion of the Family Life Center with Youth Wing, a state-of-the-art kitchen, the expansion of parking lots with the acquisition of adjoining lands, the acquisition of the downtown Frank O'Donnell Bread of Life food pantry, and the purchase of a home to house families in transition named in memory of Chris Waller. We also now have a second campus, the Agape campus, which was originally the Wesley United Methodist Church of Springdale. Following God with a willingness to expand our blessings has been a continual theme as First Church has grown and evolved over the last 150 years.
UMW has had a large impact on this church as well as its community and international missions over the years. We believe our local unit was started in 1906, and it was called the Ladies' Aid Society at that time. As our women's group grew, they were remembered for serving delicious meals to the Rotary Club over the years. The meals were cooked in the kitchen in the basement of what is our current-day chapel.
I would like to tell you a little bit about the handbell ministry here at First Church. It started when the Ruby Elmer family purchased the first handbells in the mid-1970s. The first group of ringers were called the Ruby Elmer Handbell Choir. In 2009, my family funded a new set of handbells and chimes. We are now called the Celebration Ringers. Handbells offer an added dimension of music for the congregation to enjoy. I have been ringing for 25 years.
Over the years, since 1929, we have witnessed in this church the growth in our church attendance and in our church ability to give, the size and the diversity of musical presentations. And I was talking to Earlene Henry, and she recalled a time when some of the Presbyterians even joined our choir. So I think it's had some influence. Clara Shaw was an organist for 50 years in this church. Now that was dedication. Earlene Henry also directed children's choirs for a period of time in the 1960s. Geneva Powers led the adult choir for years and brought us to a new performance level.
In the spring of 1980, before we moved into the new sanctuary from the old one, and the ladies that did so much work at the church had already finished everything up and wanted to have something really nice to go to the new sanctuary. And they had been working on it and going in churches and looking around, and they all decided that what they wanted to do was to do some needlepoint kneelers for our church.
There were 27 kneeler designs, 23 kneelers. One was a wedding kneeler, and the others were to go around the altar. Two of them were triple designs, which this is one that I did. And there were two of them. Hasselhoffs did the other one for the corners. And over the years, I think in the sanctuary, a stage was done where there was not room. After they remodeled, there was not room for the corner kneelers. So these now are in storage. The basket weave stitch was used on all of them. There were 75 people that I've added up that were directly involved with doing the project.
Betsy got a kick out of my story that once we were walking to the library, another Methodist friend that lived up the street, Judy, and we were walking by the church, and she said, "Let's go in and get a Coke." So we did. The church was open, wide open. We went right into the basement, opened the fridge, and had a Coke. And nobody bothered us.
And that's great that you can just walk into the church and help yourself to a little afternoon snack.
My name is Sandy Boone Graham. I was named after my father, Sandy Boone, who grew up in this church, and he had a famous story about one Sunday in church that everybody wanted me to tell, but I'm going to read it because he did it for the bicentennial booklet. And I want it in his own words like he used to say it. He said, "From the time I was about 5 years old to about 12, I always wore cowboy clothes with 2 guns all the time, even to church. One Sunday when I was 7 or 8 years old, the bishop was coming to visit a Methodist church when it was down on Emma Avenue where the old post office was. which is now the Chamber of Commerce building, which is still there. The preacher had told everyone for weeks to be sure and be in church on that Sunday because the bishop would be there and we must have a full house. Sure enough, everyone did come and the place was packed. Even the sliding walls to the annex where Sunday school was held were open. Every Sunday, Mary Frances George's dad and my dad always sang in the choir. We grew up and lived on adjoining farms, so our families always came to church together and sat together. We always had dinner together afterwards. Well, this Sunday was no different, and we came in with Mary Frances leading the way, followed by Joe Dale, Aunt Madge, me, my mother, and my sister. We sat on the third row from the front. Everything went fine until about the middle of the bishop's sermon, when Joe Dale began to wiggle and squirm around, and Aunt Madge told her to be still, but she wouldn't do it. Aunt Madge was pretty hefty, and she was sitting way out in the seat, a lot of space between her and the back of the pew, kind of like I'm sitting because we were both short-legged, and we couldn't reach the floor if we sat out the way we should have. As I motioned to Joe Dale to meet me behind her back of Aunt Madge, and I pulled out one of my guns. Now this gun had one of the new caps that had just come out and was about the size of a nickel. So I was showing it to her and pulled the hammer back. As you might guess, my thumb slipped and the gun went off. Aunt Madge jumped straight up in the air like a panther and screamed, "Oh my God, I've been shot." My mother jumped on the pew, grabbed the gun, and started swinging it around above her head, screaming, "It's just a toy, it's just a toy." Everyone was running around and going in every way until the bishop finally said, "Let's get back to our seats now and get on with the service." No one was shot.
Without the faith and fortitude of our brothers and sisters in Christ, the vision of our church today could not have been realized.